Good evening, everyone, and welcome to November 22nd Legal Contracts and Board Policy Meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Has everyone had a chance to read the meeting minutes from last meeting? Any questions? No questions? Okay, we will get started with our agenda for this evening, and I want to turn over now to Mrs. Fido.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Is there a particular order you'd like me to go in, or am I free to just... Okay. I thought I would start with the revisions to the pronoun policy for students and employees. At the last board meeting, there was one requested change to remove the language of case by case and to swap that out for individual or individualized, depending on the context. So we made that small edit. The policy is now ready for a third and final reading, and if this committee sees it fit, we could get that probably scheduled for the November 28th meeting. If not that meeting, then the December meeting.
Okay, yes, we can put that on the agenda for our next meeting so we can get this taken care of and move on.
Okay. Next board meeting,
yeah,
yes.
Next board meeting.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yes.
When you said next meeting, I wasn't sure.
No, I'm sorry, next board meeting. Next board meeting, yes.
The 28th.
The 28th,
Yes.
yeah. Perfect. So then the next series of items on the agenda are all from the latest round of the Neola updates. So we're going to have a steady stream of a bunch of Neola updates for this committee to consider. Because of the pandemic, there's really two updates we're trying to fit into one, and then we're going to be getting another update here in January. So there's going to be quite a few Neola policies coming through for their first reading, and we'll try and space those out as best as we can, but we do want to make sure that we get those updates out there now that we've had some staff review and comments on all those policies. So the ones for today are pretty straightforward, and I thought I'd start with some of the most straightforward one. So I'd like to refer you to policy 5460.01, diploma referral. This is actually a new policy for Akron Public Schools. It had been a Neola form policy in the past, but had never been adopted. This has been reviewed by the relevant administrators, and they like the policy. It's things that the district had already been doing, but they think it's a good idea to make sure that we have something in writing. So there's no comments in terms of like changes or any red flags. There is one option at the end of the policy, and that option has been selected for quarter, not semester. And in sum, this policy really has to do with any special education student, any student on an IEP, for them to have a social graduation. So in other words, they may not have completed all their goals on their IEP, or they may be able to stay under the care of the to be educated until they're 22 years old, but they can socially graduate with their peers at 18. And so this sets out the parameters for that and how the district handles those types of situations. So it's something we had been doing but had not been formally put in a policy. Neola put this out. We took a look at it and think it's a good idea to go ahead and memorialize that in writing as part of board policy. So that's the update for the diploma referral. Any questions?
I was just going to make a comment. I thought this is what we did anyhow for years. It just seemed like we were putting it on paper. Now, I wasn't sure that we didn't have a policy, but we do now. So
yeah, it's exactly what we've been doing,
right.
But we've never put it on paper as part of the formal policies.
Got it. Thank you.
Perfect. So the next one I wanted to discuss is policy 7440.03. It's small unmanned aircraft systems. This is a current APS policy, and this governs the use, they call it small unarmed aircraft systems, but for all intents and purposes, we're talking about drones. And so this really, the only update here is updating the federal citation. The federal, this is governed by the FAA, the use of drones, and so that federal citation has changed. So Neola suggested that we indicate that on this policy, and they suggested suggested that we pass it with this updated citation so that there's clarity for anyone who's looking at this policy. So this is a really minor edit and something that Neola encourages all the boards to pass who have this policy in place, which we do. Any questions on this one? Perfect. So the next one I wanted to touch base on is policy 8330, student records. This is most definitely an existing policy that the district has. And again, these are Neola suggested minor edits to this very lengthy policy. And the crux of the edits are that there's been a change in state law to the Safe at Home program. So this is a program that assists survivors of domestic violence, trafficking, rape, sexual assault from shielding their address in public records. The state law was updated so that now a person who qualifies for this program has some sort of identification card or piece of paper from the Secretary of State demonstrating that they can be a part of this program. And so this policy is updated to show that a person has to produce that record or that identification card in order to be enrolled in this program. And what that would mean then is they are given a sort of substitute address that is in any document that might be available to the public. And that we couldn't release their real address, we'd only be able to release their substitute address as approved by the Secretary of State. So those are the changes to the student record policy. Any questions?
One question. So the last part where it says safe homes, that's the only piece that other than the kind of little minor he or she's that we changed in this policy?
That's correct. Okay. Yeah, there's often some technical cleanup, making words gender neutral and things like that. But the substantive changes here has to do with the Safe at Home program.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And again, this was a suggested must pass from Neola as well because of the state law change. Any questions on this policy? Okay. So the next one is policy 8320. This is personnel files. And again, there are very minor updates to this. Some cleanup in terms of creating more gender neutral language within the policy. And then again, a reference to that Safe at Home program about a valid confidentiality program authorized by the Secretary of State. So again, that same sort of cleanup with respect to the state law change on the Safe at Home program is also reflected in the personnel file changes. And again, this is an existing Neola policy with the district and a Neola recommendation as a must-pass policy. Any questions on personnel files? Okay, so the next one I'd like to draw your attention to is policy 3120.08. And this is employment of personnel for co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So this is an existing policy of the district, and this policy governs either teachers who are on some sort of supplemental contract or a non-teaching professional who would be under a limited pupil activity contract, who's either a coach, they oversee an extracurricular activity, things of that nature. And this policy, they're trying to clean up language and clarify that a person who's not already a teacher or doesn't hold some other license must have a pupil activity program permit by the state of Ohio before they can be a coach or another sort of person that's overseeing an extracurricular activity for the district. So it's really making sure that everyone understands that you can't work with children unless you have this permit from the state. You can't get paid for your job and things like that. The policy in general just talks about how any person who's hired for these types of positions, whether it's coaching or some other extracurricular, has to do a background check and prove that they have the credentials, this pupil activity permit, so that they can be employed by the district lawfully. So again, this is cleanup language, just really clarifying that these pupil activity permits must be in hand by the district before they can be employed in any sort of co-curricular or extracurricular oversight role with the district. Any questions about this one? Okay. So the next one I'd like to draw your attention to is Policy 6700, Fair Labor Standards Act. So there's been a couple of some cleanup language in here, again, making sure that some of the language is more gender neutral. And then there's been an addition to this policy for reasonable time for nursing mothers. There's been no law change here. The district has had a Fair Labor Standards Act policy, but Neola flagged this as something to memorialize in the policy because I think based on the feedback they're getting, there might be some confusion about policies for nursing mothers and providing space for them to express milk and things like that. So if you're an employee covered by the FLSA does provide an independent right for nursing mothers to have access to space to express milk and to have time to do that within their job duties. So this has been a current law. It's just never been added to the Neola form policy. It certainly wasn't in the districts as written. This would all be new. So it's new policy, but it's law that's already been in place. And I think there's often a lot of confusion on this point because like the Affordable Care Act does something, like various laws impose certain requirements on employers to have sort of lactation rooms and things like that. But this is something specific for employees covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act. And for the purposes of this school district, that would typically be your non-professional staff. Any questions on this?
Comment. This is something that's already probably been practiced, even
That's
though we
right.
don't have it in policy.
That's
right.
right.
Yeah.
That's right, because it's been current law for some
Right.
years now. It's just, again, it's never been written in our policy, and Neola's never provided it as something that should be included in our policy. But it is now. It is the law, so we want to memorialize that in a way that makes sense.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any questions on this one? Okay. The next one I want to draw your attention to is Policy 8600. This is transportation. The transportation policy for the district has gone through. I do believe there might be some additional edits to this. This has been reviewed by Deborah and her team and signed off, but I do think there might be some additional changes here. As you know, there has been a number of state law changes on transportation over the past 2 years from the pandemic, starting really with the pandemic, but those changes seem to still be coming. And a lot of that has to do with the district's responsibility to transport students at chartered, non-chartered, private schools. At what point and at when can we do payment in lieu? What does payment in lieu look like? And so this policy is updated based on the current state law and is something that Neola suggests that we do pass. But I do believe that this is in good form now, but we probably want to keep looking at this because those laws just keep changing. And so there could be more that needs to be added to this, but this is the latest version that Neola has put out. Any questions about this one? Nothing? Okay. All right. I saw you guys all reading.
You're waiting
so
very
I thought,
patiently.
Yeah,
Yes, we
I was
were.
just like, okay. And then the last one is Policy 8210. This is school calendar. And this is not necessarily, the district had this policy in place. This is the latest update from Neola. And the main thing here is it's allowing the district to decide if they're going to do a calendar annually or biannually. And then it also references that the state law has changed now in terms of when you can go, you can't just go remote anymore, how many days you can bring a blizzard bag and things like that. So there are minor edits, but I do think they're pretty impactful. But again, this is a policy that the board already had. These are suggestions for Neola to update it. And so that's really what this one is conveying here. Any questions?
You said this was biannually, right? Because we checked biannually.
Yes. So actually, I think we did have to update this one, right, Heidi? The school calendar one.
Yes, it was quite different from the policy.
So I think there might be an old version that.
We had an old version.
Okay. All right. Then we can get that. We can get that one updated and maybe hold on this one if you guys don't have the most current.
This would be the most current, though, right? This year.
We had to update it earlier today, though.
Put up like noon or 1 o'clock p.m.
Oh.
So it was a late change.
Okay, got it. Okay.
But we actually can bring, there's no urgent
Right,
necessity.
No,
so,
no.
Yeah. So we
I
definitely
can wait for the new version in case there's any other changes and I can get it
Absolutely.
later.
we
can do that for her.
Yeah.
Okay. And those are all the
The updates, huh?
updates.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to go over today,
No.
other than these updates? And we do have the 2 policies that we'll have our third reading on our next board meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Questions, Kyle? Well, all right. Well, I guess we'll adjourn this meeting if we have nothing else. And everyone have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your family and friends and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
is a
You too.
perfect focus meeting right before the holiday.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
We're adjourned.